Kilted balls. I don't think I got a kilted out of you.
You surprised me.
Awesome. Love that cup. Is that a Goodwill find if I remember?
Yep, that is a Goodwill find.
That is amazing.
Full of
That is amazing.
water.
I think it's amazing. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Kilted Balls podcast. We're so glad to see you here. There was just a second. There you go. Your keyboard matches the pop I'm drinking, the good old Michigan Faygo grape.
Yes, that is wonderful.
A little known fact for our listeners.
A little bit of a different setup in here, but I'm not sure what I'm going to do. So you do get to see the keyboard today. I'm not sure if I'm keeping it.
I like it. It gives us lots of fun colors. That's nice. I think that's pretty. And you're drinking, did you say sippy water?
Fizzy water.
Oh, fizzy water. I was like, weird to call it sippy water. I'm not sure if I understand that reference. But, and listeners, you can hear me this week. So sorry for last week's episode. So like we talked about, I have a new setup and a new computer, and the mics are not doing what they're supposed to. But now we have a mic and it's working and it's doing fantastic, right? So things are going good. And I have a couple things I want to talk about. But one thing I am like super excited to talk about.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so I don't know what you got on your agenda today, but I have a query for you and our listeners that I kind of wanted your take on and your thoughts.
Okay. We'll do yours first.
Yes. Good, because I'm excited. Like, I even told my wife about it today, and she was not excited, but I'm excited.
Oh, good.
I'm excited about it.
Best episodes.
Yeah. Anytime she's like, I'm like, oh, that's going to be a great episode. So, listeners, you're in for a treat. This is Amy unapproved, so that always means it's good. Always means good. All right, so have you heard people like make the statement before, like, oh, we as humans only use like 10% of our brains? And people
I've heard that.
Yeah, and then people are, and it's wrong. FYI, people, like that's, people say it all the time, that's not real. You use your whole brains. But it's fun because they'll make movies like Johnny Mnemonic or Lucy, or there's a whole bunch where, like, if we're able to access 20% or 50% or 100%, like, you can control things with your mind, right? Or you can change the TV channel by looking at it, or you can read people's thoughts, or you can, like, manipulate the stock market. You know what I'm talking about? Okay.
No, that's all true.
Yeah, so all big cultural things that we're used to, correct? Okay. So for our listeners, and my numbers might be a little bit off, but I had this thought recently, and I was like, ooh, I really got to ask Kilted about this. So our brains, it is like theorized, I might be off just a tad, but are theorized to be able to do 10 to the 13th processes a second. Okay? So that's what they theorize our brains can do. In reality, it's much less than that. Okay, so like we don't do that kind of processing, but they think like maybe we could do that kind of processing. Make sense? Okay.
I'll go along with this before we delve in.
Okay. So that's like the thought, right? Like we can do that. We have computers now that are doing 10 to the 18th processes per second. Okay. So computers at this point are way more powerful than human brains. Like it's not even... The difference between 10 to the 13th and 10 to the 18th is stupid size, right? Yes. Stupid amounts difference. Like humans a lot of times have trouble with these numbers. So listeners, it's a stupid amount of difference. How far they're past.
What, 5 extra zeros?
5 extra zeros.
So just think of your bank account with 5 extra zeros.
Just think if you could bench 5 extra zeros. Just think if your height, instead of 6 feet tall, was 60,000 feet tall. Right? Like, we're talking about it's a stupid amount bigger. And we're getting them to go faster and faster, and their AI is
Yes.
going faster and faster. And I haven't seen the genre, and my query was, you've probably seen this. You've been exposed to a lot more books and movies than I have. But if people are thinking that if we accessed all of our brain, that we could move objects with our mind, shouldn't a computer running well beyond what we can operate be able to move things with its mind? Can't the computer be telekinetic? Can't the computer be psychic? Why isn't the computer, or is it able to, control the stock market or do the stock market? Right? Like, if it's surpassing us,
Yeah.
which it is, it's like...
In the computation.
Not just in the computation, they now have them, like, not only is the AI like good enough to beat us at chess, right, which was one of the benchmarks,
Yeah.
they're getting so good that they can program a computer to beat you at Go, which was always the hardest one to get it to do. And it, within a tiny fraction of time, can then beat you at chess or Monopoly or whatever other game. Like, it doesn't, you can train it on chess and it can extrapolate that to every other game. It can teach itself the games, right?
Did we talk about the robot that committed suicide on the podcast?
We have not. Not at all. Not at all.
Have you heard about that?
No. Not that I'm aware of, right?
Yeah, there was a robot in one of the Koreas. I forget which one.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a robot programmed to clean and blah blah blah, and it committed suicide. Did look up the story.
I was gonna say I'll have to look up the story.
So I got like just talking about that. Yeah, it's an interesting idea because and I think it goes back to the potential. It's more like the potential of humans, I think, is 10% compared to what we could do with our minds. But yeah, your brain only uses so much
But even if you made that as true, even if you said, okay, it's true. If we used 100% of our brains, we'd be able to do that. Like, if you're like, we don't use our full potential, we could, it's like 10% to 100%. That's only 10 times better.
Yeah.
Like, that's only 10 times better. And we're talking 5 zeros better.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking 100,000 times better.
Now, I would say if computers can't do that, I would say it's because they're one step removed from the hologram, from the matrix, from whatever you want to call it, from the soul, from source. Yeah, that's interesting.
Right, and I don't know, and so this was such a multi-faceted question, because at the beginning I was like, has somebody written a story about this? Like, has somebody written a story about a psychic computer, right? And you know that in one of our games, I was playing a computer that could morph into animals, not like a transformer, but more like a druid, more like a werewolf. Like, it could become a wolf, even though it was mechanical when it was in its human form. Like, that was its thing. And which again becomes like the reality. If a human could transform into a werewolf, why couldn't a machine transform into a werewolf? It actually would probably be easier, right? Mm-hmm. And so then I'm like, okay, what about this brain thing? Like, if computers, and we're not just talking about AI right now, we're talking about like their actual literal powers just better.
Yeah. So
shouldn't they be able to do those things that we think humans can do with their brains? Mm-hmm. And so then there's two thoughts. Like, one of our listeners right away is going to be like, because you're dealing with the false pretense that humans can do those things.
Yes.
He would say,
I can see that.
Right? He would say humans can't do those things. So Of course, the computer can't do those things. Those things aren't things you can do, which is reasonable.
Yeah.
Right? That would be reasonable. It could be that you don't know how to do those things, and neither does the computer. And maybe the computer will learn those things.
Will AI figure it out?
And right. So just because you don't know how to run super fast, right? Like, that doesn't mean you couldn't. I imagine there was a time when people didn't know they could run backwards, I guess. I don't know.
Well, there was a time where people believed that you couldn't run a 5-minute mile or 4-minute mile.
Yes.
What was it? 4? Yeah, it had to have been 4.
Yeah, and now that's regular, right? Yeah. So, just because we say they can't, right? Maybe there would be a way to do that. But it brings up a tremendous amount of questions, because then I was thinking about your channeler, and I was like, okay, why hasn't a channeler, if you have the ability to put your thoughts into a human, then you clearly have the ability to put your thoughts into a computer. The computer theoretically should be easier.
That channeler says that all their stuff is alive. Their ship is sentient.
Yeah.
It's living.
How could it not be?
Yeah.
How could it not be? Right. And so is it them, or is it the ship doing it? The ship would be oodles and oodles past them. So why wouldn't the ship be channeling just as much as they would be channeling?
So I've heard it just as much from him as from other people doing similar things, is that there are agreements that they can't just do a knowledge dump. We've chosen to be here to learn something. So we have to learn that. Someone can't just come in and say, oh, you can do all this stuff. And this is how.
This is how, right.
Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Someone can say you can do it, and then you figure it out. It just depends on what you believe. There are things where, even in the Bible, there's things that you can do, but it's not necessarily said do this and this and this and this.
Right. So yeah.
Speaking of, let me interrupt real quick.
No, you're good. Go ahead. Interrupt.
Speaking of the Bible.
Yes.
And I just want to say this. I was going to write it, but I was like, nope. What you've come up with, I think, is truly amazing and super awesome. And I think the 5th one is actually you're a few chapters off. I think it's Timothy 10.
Okay, I could be.
I'm just teasing.
That's why I need proofreaders, right? It could actually be 2 Timothy, not Timothy 1. So, yeah, so you had a chance to proofread the work. Yes? Yeah, I think that's going to be, I think people will find value in that. So, maybe I'm wrong, but I think, I'm looking at it, I'm I think this could be valuable to people. I think they would enjoy that. So, it's got a lot of work to do, so. But yeah, so anyway, that was my thought thing, and what do you think about that? One, have you ever seen it in a genre? I haven't. And then 2, which is more likely that the computers, as they reach sentience, will gain those abilities, or that those abilities are not really a thing. They're a figment of our brains, because our brains are powerful enough to conjure those either way. Right?
Yeah.
Our brains are big.
So we have close friends that love The Expanse, and I don't think you've read any. You
Never read it.
The first one.
Nope.
So honestly, I would say that storyline is the closest that I've seen to that, and I don't want to give anything away, but it's super super close to what you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
It took me a second. It didn't occur at first. But yeah, where the computer can do things that even the humans couldn't do.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, and what Stephen King's book, and I've never read the book. I saw the movie, which I think Stephen King didn't like the movie. I don't remember, but was Lawnmower Man, where that human became strong enough to do that. But he said as a computer, he could do even more and joined the electrical grid so they could have even more power over everything.
Yeah.
You know, but again,
that was a good story.
Yeah, so like some of those things we've hit upon, but nobody's talked about could AI have that potential.
I've heard people say that with AI, once it's early on, that we need to treat it as an equal, not as a subordinate, because the bad AI movies that you've seen, like that can be a thing.
Well, so I'm reading a book right now. That's what spurred a lot of these thoughts.
Okay.
All right, so I'm reading a book, not a sci-fi fantasy book. So like a real book. What's the word? Nonfiction. A nonfiction book I am reading right now. Lots of graphs, super, super technical. I'm enjoying it, but it's hard to read. I'm like only 84, 85 pages in. And if you're a normal person, you're like, what do you mean? That means like you've read a lot, you don't understand. Like I can read 84 pages in really quick time. So I tend to be a voracious reader. So it's taken me like a week and a half, I think, to get through those 84 pages. So it's got a lot in it, a lot of meat. But one of the premises, one of their conjectures that I've kind of like gotten out of this so far, and again, I'm not that far into it, so we'll see if I'm right. But he thinks that the way AI is going to be is not a what did you say, as equals?
Yeah.
Not as equals, not as like good actors and bad actors, but that we will actually incorporate AI. Think like Borg, maybe. He didn't say Borg, but think Borg. Like, and his
we're halfway there. I mean,
his prediction, just to kind of put this to people, he said this in I think 2005.
Okay.
He predicted this would happen by 2029. People thought he was crazy, thought he was dumb. People were like, no, it won't happen until like 2100. Computers won't be advanced enough. And he was like, nope, 2029. And then 5 years later, people were like, okay, it'll happen by 2060. Yeah. And then like 5 years later, they were like, okay, it's going to happen by 2040. And then 5 years ago, they were like, it's going to happen by 2030. And now the experts are like, it's going to happen by 2026. And he's like, I'm still telling you it's 2029. Like, I haven't changed what I said. And and what his statement is, and a few of our listeners will appreciate this, he says humans can't think exponentially. He goes, they don't understand exponentials. He goes, and it's an exponential growth model. And he's like, all you have to do is follow the data, and it will grow, and it will hit in 2029. That's when we will start to combine ourselves with machines. Yeah. And he's like, and that's when things are going to be like, like you'll basically live forever. Like, it's going to be crazy. And again, I haven't gotten that far into it, so I don't think I'm spoiling anything because this isn't anything he said. This is stuff I know he's going to say. Yeah. Like I'm predicting what he's going to say. But it's like a riveting, like to me, thought process. Like, okay, and like you said, like we've already got this, and that's literally his point. In 2005, we didn't have this. We had flip phones, right? But we didn't have like the entire internet on us doing it. You know what I mean? Like there was a separation. So I'm like,
what's the book and the author, and how'd you stumble across it, if you could?
Yeah, so the book is Singularity is Nearer. And I'll put a link in the comments, people, so you can check out the comments. It's The Singularity is Nearer. It's kind of a sequel to his book in 2005, The Singularity is Near.
Okay.
Right? And
sounds familiar.
Yeah, he is a pretty well-renowned futurist with so many of his predictions coming true. Because he would say they're not predictions. He would say, I'm just reading the data. This is what the data says. I'm just telling you what the data says is going to happen. You just don't believe the data, right? Mm-hmm. And he goes, and data just is data, right? That's how it works.
So this one just came out.
Came out. I did not know it just came out this summer. I thought it came out in 2023. It didn't. He was writing it in 2023. And it just came out this summer. The reason I found it was I listened to him on Neil deGrasse Tyson's show and their podcast, and I only listened to half of it. And I had to start doing something else, but I'm like, I heard enough that I was like, I have to read that book. And so I walked in, got online, thought it came out a year ago because he kept talking about writing it in 2023.
Yeah.
And then I ordered the book and I was like, wait, this book just came out. So basically he's like going through what all's happened since 2005 and how now it's more obvious to everybody. Whereas in 2005, people thought he was kind of a crackpot. And now people are like, I can see that.
Yeah.
Right? Like I was thinking even like he doesn't know this in the book because he wrote the book in 2023. But like what he doesn't realize is like Elon Musk's, what do they call that? His Neuralink. The guy they put the Neuralink in is starting to beat professional gamers because the computer chip is making him that much faster.
Wow.
Right?
That's crazy.
So like he's gaining all of these skills because that's making him so much faster. And when people like realize, wait, I could just like somebody recently was like, you don't think if you could, rather than have to pick this up to Google stuff, you could just be like, Google this and like it was there? You wouldn't do that? And I'm like, for sure people would do that. For sure they would do it. People loved the Google glasses that they could just be like seeing it going by. I'm like, people would do that for sure if they could get an implant. And I'm like, if you could download your brain into a computer to have everything stored, like if I could have my mom do that right now, I just said, I'm like, man, we got to make sure my mom lives another 4 years till we're hitting that time so we can download her brain. I don't want those memories to go away, right? There's so much knowledge there. And I'm like, we're to the point now where a computer can do that. They have the storage to handle a human memory bank, right?
Yeah.
Which, back when you and I were in college, our minds were blown by a terabyte server. They're like,
well, that was post-college, but yeah.
And I literally have, sorry, people, I'm going to stand, I don't know, this is probably like, what, 4 terabytes? Like, just, like, sitting in my hand?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I can't even read it. I think that's what it says. Right, like, I wouldn't buy one that's not a terabyte. Like, I wouldn't even imagine it. And I remember when our buddy bought that terabyte server, I was like, what would you ever need a terabyte for?
Yeah.
Right? Like, why would you ever need a terabyte? My computer.
It was like when I got the card for the PlayStation 5. I was like, I need at least that.
At least that. Right? You don't even think about it. And so if this is like what we generically just grab, like that's how many I have around me, right? Like I just grabbed this one. I don't even know how many terabytes this is. I bought it a while ago for all my computer backups. Right? So I have like multiple computers like backed up on this. Like,
yeah.
And so, and we're just normal humans, right? We're normal people. So imagine what like companies have in the terms of terabytes, right?
Yeah.
And so that thought like, oh my gosh, we're to the point now where we can like download our brains, right? And then if you can download your brain, then it has that consciousness, and that's kind of crazy. You know, and now we're getting into the realm of, what's it called? Player One, the sequel.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I wasn't going to talk about that one, but I had just finished a book where that like everything happened to the world, This guy, he was dying of the crazy disease, and they took all of his memories and they jacked him in the computer, and he's like running around doing stuff because I like a lot of the lit RPGs,
Yes.
and that's what it is. And then he got a notification like, "Oh, we're sorry to inform you, your body's dead." But he's still living in the game. Like, where does his consciousness end, and where does he die?
Yeah.
Which is the thing. I can see that. I can see people being able to choose, and we've all seen movies like, well, even the Ready Player 2.
Is that what it's called? I'm like, is that the sequel?
Yeah,
Ready Player 2. Like, if you haven't read that, people, like, Ready Player 1 is great. I enjoyed Ready Player 2 as well, but Ready Player 2 hits these kind of concepts. Like, could you exist and your consciousness wouldn't know the difference?
Mm-hmm.
There would all of a sudden be two of you in existence, right? Mm-hmm. And at the moment of separation, that's where things would change. And, like, that's a crazy thought. I kind of want to reread that book now.
I would say Ready Player 1 is easy one of my top 10.
Ready Player 1's pretty damn good. Pretty good. Mm-hmm. And the movie was good too. So, so we're getting a little bit off of the beaten path, but that's the idea, right? And we're approaching that like the guy was talking about, like, what did he say? If you are below 80 and in good health, you will live to see this happen. He goes, if your kids are going into elementary school, they will grow up with the AIs.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to be a thing, right? And it's just like, that's crazy, right? Like,
I might have to listen to this book.
Yeah, like I said, it's meaty and there's graphs. I bought the book because he kept talking about the graphs. I'm like, I want to see these graphs. And
okay. Yeah, that's
so far I'm only
someone's reading it to you.
Yeah.
The graphs are awesome.
No, like I've only seen two of the graphs. I've only seen two of the graphs so far. So I'm still waiting, but he's really funny. So this isn't going to make sense to like anybody but you, Jamie. But all of the graphs he's shown so far, he makes them, the scales on the graph, logarithmic so that everything is linear. But it's a logarithmic graph, which for those of you who don't understand what that means like it looks like it's linear, but that's only when you're considering the fact that it's jumping by multiple zeros every time.
Oh, wow.
Like it's not going linear, it's going, it's going up, by 10, by 1,000, by 1,000,000, by...
You didn't want to have flip-up pages?
No, where it goes like... He didn't want a big, huge-ass curve, so he made it logarithmic on the scale. So the scale is like 10, 100, 1,000, 1,000,000, 10 million, like whatever, so that it makes it a nice straight line. Mm-hmm. Which makes it easier for normal humans to read. But like for like me, I'm like, ha ha ha, that's so funny. Like I would have just left it logarithmic. So, but I also get it. Like I'm like, I get why you're doing that. That's smart. Yeah. Like that makes it super clear for people. So anyway, yeah. So those were the queries, and
that's super awesome.
Going along with channeling and everything else, I'm like, oh my gosh, like could a computer channel a consciousness, or is that not even an actual possibility? That's a thing. Like it's going to go two different ways, right? Like if we find out that a computer can't do it, and then it's going to get into what's a soul, what's not a soul, what's alive, what's not alive, and it's going to cause a lot of real ethical dilemmas. Like I think it's really interesting, right?
Well, it even goes back to, is someone actually channeling, or are they just bringing up something from inside and just saying it? And it's a deeper knowledge than maybe what they have on their surface. That's, that even goes back to there.
Yes.
And then that sucks.
What was we have no idea what just happened, except that all of a sudden you're like, that sucks.
I spilled my water.
Oh, that's sad.
Waving my arms around too much.
You're like,
But yeah, that's I'm looking forward. That'd be right around our 1000th episode.
Right? Like we are going to be able to say, if you guys go back and look at episode 194, we talked about this very thing happening. Right? Go back. Boop, boop, boop. And it'll automatically rewind. Like, that's the crazy part right now. Here's what's going to make you see huge jumps in AI, and this was in the book. So this wasn't my idea, but it's like, I was like, oh, duh, right? Mm-hmm. But, one of the things that, like, the large language models, ChatGPT and all those are really good for is computer programming, right? And so one of the big things that's happened now, and listeners may know this, Kilted does for sure, but when we first got into NFTs, I wanted to make NFTs. And so I was learning how to write a program to make NFTs. And it was a huge pain in the butt. I was figuring it out. I was almost there. But I was also like, I should just pay somebody to write this program, right? Mm-hmm. You can just tell the AI to write the program. It'll write the program now. Like, you don't need that sophisticated skill set. You can literally do that.
Yeah. You need to have the skill set to know how to have AI do it.
And so here's the thing. You can ask AI to write a program. What about when the AI asks itself to write a program? Mm-hmm.
Well, what did I just...
You're going to see a jump, right? You're going to see a huge jump. Because it'll program itself. Yeah. The human won't be the programmer anymore. It'll program it. And they can program so much faster than we can program. So all of a sudden, their intelligence level is going to fly through the roof. And like, I had a friend who I had like said this to, and they were like, "Well, yeah, so like what? Like they'll be able to program like to make this music or whatever." I'm like, "No, like they could program themselves to be smarter. Like they could be like, hey, I don't know theoretical physics. I'm going to write a program." That'll be me doing theoretical physics. Oh, look, now I know theoretical physics. Ooh, that means I can do theoretical chemistry. And I'm going to write it, and it'll write its own programs as fast as it can think of the program it wants to write. And so its knowledge and skills are going to all of a sudden go to the stratosphere, right?
Okay, but I have a technical question for you.
Yes,
since
sir.
You brought it up.
Yeah.
If it's studying theoretical physics, now would it be considered the observer, because rules are different if there's an observer or not?
Yes.
So
right.
Would the computer be considered an observer or no?
Because and could it say
I would determine how everything's reacting?
It would change all of it, right?
That would answer the question. Really, that answers the question.
Does it count as an observer if it's a computer?
If the computer, once it did it the first time, once it did an experiment, then we would know if it's an observer or not.
Yeah.
Based on the data.
Speaking of all this, one of the things that was, that is fantastic. But it made me think, one of the things that Neil deGrasse Tyson and this guy talked about in their episode, and I hit this in the book already once or twice. So if you're not into computers and all this junk, people, the big famous thing forever is the Turing test. So Turing made up this test before for AI, and it's basically like if you were having a text chat, true AI will be when you can't tell that it's AI that you're chatting with, that you think it's a normal human you're having a chat with. So that's the thing. And they were laughing about the fact that we are to the point right now that the reason the AI can't pass a Turing test is because it's too smart. Like,
so it's okay. That
so
makes sense.
In order for the AI right now to pass a Turing test, it has to make itself appear as stupid as a human.
That's what I was catching on.
Because it can answer the questions too fast, right?
I mean, when you think of really smart friends that we have who sometimes listens to episodes and sometimes not, they talk different.
They talk differently. And now like, imagine that's like Data, right? You can tell Data's a machine on Star Trek because he talks and acts differently, right? Like, in order to sound like a human, he has to slow himself down.
That's awesome.
Right? And so they said the problem for the AI is it can't sound dumb. It answers your questions correctly. And it answers them fast. And it answers... They've got AI right now that are... They can hear your joke tell you that it's a joke and tell you why it's funny. Like, that's something that people thought only humans could do, because it's taking such a vast amount of knowledge to know that it's a joke. And that's not something, and here's why it's weird. In old computer thinking, you couldn't program enough variables for a computer to understand those things all the time. But the way they're programming the computers now to be like human brains, and so it's able to draw those conclusions and be like, oh, this is why you would think that's funny.
Yeah. That's wild. That's so wild.
Yes, it's wild. And we've always said we're living in crazy times, and they're getting crazier. And remember, he wrote this book a year ago.
Yeah, great find.
He's already talking. He's like,
I'll listen to it before next week for sure.
Like, he's like, at this time, I'm sure the AI is already past this. And I'm like, you're already past what I know AI does.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, it's just crazy. It's crazy. So, yeah, you'll get more updates, people, as we go on, and more queries from me. I would love to hear, listeners, your thoughts on this. Jason, I know you'll tell us as soon as you listen, so that's awesome. Right? But the rest of you, like, let us know. Join our Discord. Shoot us some comments on Twitter. Right? Put us some comments on YouTube or Spotify. But let us know your thoughts. Do you think a computer can be psychic? Do you think a computer can read your mind? Can they channel? Could they do a seance? They could, I think, right now convince you that they did a seance.
I would agree with that.
Right? I think they could trick you into thinking that they're smart enough.
Especially because some people put enough of their life out there where it's all access.
Yeah.
And the computer just could look it up and be able to say a lot of things.
They could say so many things. Like, tell me only something I would know. Well, I know about that little birthmark you have because it saw the nudies that you sent.
I knew your first school is Billy Bob Central from your password you saved.
Yes, and you had a crush on Jimmy Joe in the 3rd grade and wrote him this little note. Yeah. Should be crazy. Should be crazy. Yeah. Okay, so that was mine. Sorry, I used up almost all of our time. What was yours?
Mine is I wanted to give you props on what you had sent me, and I was able to work it in the middle.
Yeah, I'm excited to let you listeners know about that fun project. So, I don't know when I'll tell you guys about it. I've probably already told listeners about it already, but yeah, I sent it to you for proofing, and then we can get that sucker moving. It'll be awesome. So
yeah,
I'm excited about it. Well, anyway, listeners, I think that was I told my wife, and she was like, I don't understand anything you're saying. I can't think this much.
I thought it was an awesome episode.
So I apologize, listeners, if that was just too much and it made your brain explode. So that's on me. I'll own that. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed that. So sorry if it was a little rambly. Kilted, thank you for entertaining my emotion.
That's awesome.
To hear that. But reach out, people. Otherwise, this is Ballbuster signing off.
Kilted Dragon Jerry, love you all.